The genre I'm going to be discussing is horror, and the subgenres I'm going to be talking about are satirical and found footage horror. The topic is the development of the horror genre and how the creators create fear within the audience relative to the cultural contexts. Some of the discussions may include film techniques, film theory, and subject matter. The films I am covering are The Blair Witch Project, a 1999 found footage film that was groundbreaking for the use of online marketing in film and a cultural phenomenon in terms of its effect on the audience, and Get Out, a 2017 film that brought to light the underlying social ramifications of living as an African American. I'm going to be discussing the cultural context of these two films and how they have had to adapt to their relative contexts in order to make an impact on the audience. The horror genre has been a highly loved and yet widely criticized genre overall, with its novel value and yet overused cliches. These include the black or female characters in a film dying first, characters with illogical behaviors in tense situations, bad self-and reception in the woods, stereotypical eeriness of certain locations, and common character tropes. However, these all stemmed from the development of horror movies, which originated from literature. Horror is something that manifests the fears of people who live in different cultural contexts. That fear is ever-changing and evolving, hence why most people do not find older films of a different context particularly scary. Sometimes we even find it comical. But the evolution of horror is what keeps us engaged in the genre, and it is what I'm going to talk about.
This is Burkittsville, formerly Blair. It is a small, quiet Maryland town, much like a small, quiet town anywhere.
The Blair Witch Project made an undeniable impact on audiences all around the world. It was groundbreaking as the pioneer of the found footage subgenre and showed the true impact that a digital marketing can have. It lacked any form of mise-en-scène or formalism, with the use of shaky cam mockumentary style of a student film brought to its highest extent. The film was especially unique because of the vision of director Eduardo Sanchez and writer Daniel Myrick, who decided to film this without any form of formal script or structure. According to The Guardian, they simply put the actors in the woods and gave them some key points and let the improvisation of the actors lead this ambiguous narrative, as the cameras rolled throughout their journey, along with the fact that the actors were given limited supplies of food and the creators acted as many of the scares in the film, led to a truly genuine production through method acting that can be attributed to the auteur theory. The Blair Witch represents something very unique in its historical context. The 90s were a time of progression in society, but also a time of conflict on an international scale, with tensions in foreign nations such as Iraq being high. The Blair Witch represents this fear of the unknown. When it comes to cliches, the Blair Witch Project is a pioneer of many of them, such as the inherent fear of the woods or the found footage subgenre itself. However, it did not overuse pre-established cliches in order to maintain its realism, which is what made it more impactful on the audience. Film techniques were used intermittently throughout the film, however they were not a prime focus. Diegetic sound was used throughout, and black and white semi-still shots were used sparingly in order to tie the narrative together.
Just wandered off, disappeared into the woods.
Who knows supposedly about it? They wandered off.
Okay, so
And
she
she
wandered
got
off.
lost.
The film was shot entirely in point of view in order to create the film's relatability and thus create fear within the audience. According to an interview with Vice, the film was made using CP16 and Hi8 video cameras, which were very common at the time. Editing was simple and used to make the film chronological. Lighting was also very natural, so there were often points in the film where it was very high contrast and oversaturated. Although these elements would be very negative in the context of another film, this rather added to the effect that the creators were trying to achieve. When we look at the film's characters, we see some of the very first ignorant teen trope that has become very infamous to date. However, they also had a very strong female lead, which ties in with the feminist film theory and how Heather took a stand at breaking the typical role a female would take in a film. She was a strong leader and had many human aspects in her decision-making which added to the realism. However, this film would not have been the phenomenon it was without the use of digital marketing due to the historical context. The creators published a website with a lot of lore and information about the missing people, including staged police pictures, images of the people who went missing, theories, and even Heather's diary, with seemingly no link towards the directors. This use of marketing was so effective that a large portion of the audience was convinced on the reality of this film, and it is the context of the time of release that made this film such a success, and because of the lack of social media or video websites at the time, led to no evidence of debunking or information release, hence leading it to have a huge impact on the audience and adding an element of cognitive film theory because of the subliminal idea of that remains with the audience who contemplate upon the film's legitimacy. We can see further attempts to recreate the film's impact with films such as Paranormal Activity or even the remake of The Blair Witch in 2016 being entertaining but having nowhere near the same impact as the film had in its time. As stated by Variety magazine, the remake's artfully artless.
This is Nielsen and Elisa.
Hey, how you doing?
So, how handsome is he?
Are you handsome?
Get Out takes a far different approach in the way it conveys fear, tension, and most of all its message. A message that is conveyed through complex symbolism and motifs. As discussed before, this is a manifestation of societal fear in our current times. The fear of being ostracized and belittled because of ignorance, which is the most prevalent thing in our current social context. Similar to the Blair Witch Project, perspective is a very important component in this film. However, it is not the perspective of some documentary filmmakers, but rather an African American person in a universally relatable situation of meeting your in-laws. This perspective allows for us as the viewer to be engaged with the subject matter and see the nuances and the struggle that African Americans have to deal with on a daily basis, as well as referring to the effects of historical and systemic oppression by using film theory and film techniques. Clichés in this film were either subverted or used in a very realistic manner, such as the black characters being the victim but rather used to convey an important societal message, or the end scene to where Chris is expected to be arrested by a white officer but is subverted to be Rod. Since our expectations were subverted in such an unpredictable way, the message had a bigger impact on its audience. This contributes to director Jordan Peele's decision-making and links to the auteur theory. According to The Hollywood Reporter, there was an interview with director Jordan Peele to which he suggested Chris was meant to be the embodiment of the viewer. Whether black or white, the story created empathy for the protagonist. As he quoted, "They were all Chris. They were all the main characters," thus enhancing auteur and how Peele is able to manipulate the audience's emotions. The message of oppression is conveyed by the narrative itself. The consciousness transplantation into the desired, physically gifted black people represents a systemic racism in our social context of modernity. We see it conveyed by the character Jim Hudson, the seemingly understanding character among the ignorant white people. He is revealed to be part of the same system of exploitation, representing how the majority in America may not be contributing to the societal issues, but rather turning a blind eye, which is conveyed as equally oppressive, contributing to this notion of an oppressed minority. However, the overarching story is not the prime focus of us as the viewer. We tend to focus on the subtle nuances conveyed throughout the film, which are far more relatable. We see moments in the film that display a form of unintentional racism, such as the lines in the film at the party scene like,
Is it better?
Black is in fashion. I do know Tiger.
to these subtle lines of dialogue that every person of color has to deal with on a daily basis, something that people of a privileged majority are ignorant to, where the intention may not be bad, but these lines feel as if they subjugate African Americans to a subhuman form of conversation between people, and that the main character often brushes it off in order to blend in with the people around him, which is evident of a loss of cultural identity, as emphasized by the existence of the characters Logan, Walter, and especially Georgina, who even had her hair forcibly straightened, as shown by the picture of her in this scene, which is a symbol of forced assimilation into white society. These are representations of what a full, transformational loss of culture looks like, giving light to the post-colonial theory. These elements of an attack on personal culture and identity are what truly create fear in our time, further enhanced with film techniques. Most of the shots remain at eye level throughout the film, with the occasional point of view shot through Chris's camera to bring us closer to his perspective. This mixed in with a very low contrast bright light, and the often use of wide or long shots give us this feeling of freedom and help enhance the satirical elements, similar to that of comedy. However, as the film progresses, this feeling quickly turns into a feeling of isolation, with the crescendo and the pitch and tempo of the non-diegetic sound and the increased use of metric montage. Tension is created at a perfectly balanced pace, making this film's impact much stronger. The turning point is what happens after Rose reveals her true intentions, where the viewer is overwhelmed with a flood of emotions, realizing what happened right in front of them. This helplessness, along with many other aspects of fear and tension, is what is conveyed through film techniques, such as the cinematography, further enhanced by the symbolism, as shown in this shot. We can see the use of foreshadowing and symbolism with Chris as the large object in a deep depth of field, with the lurking woman behind him dressed in red symbolizing her involvement in the crime after her prey, him being the prey symbolized by the deer motif in the film, further enhanced by her strong gaze. As stated by The Atlantic, Jordan Peele uses the sense of sight to amplify imbalances of power and control. All this being one of the very first scenes where Chris is in an angle of inferiority, revealing his newfound powerlessness, with Rose being the mastermind with the high ground and a claustrophobic depth of field, and a lack of camera movement showing that he is truly trapped. And finally this shot, where we see the clinical, even and symmetrical center shot with Rose dressed in white, showing a truly frightening superiority complex. However, the lion, another motif previously shown, causes an imbalance in the shot, foreshadowing how the predator will now become the prey. This is the complex way in which Get Out portrays fear and tension in our current social context with the many nuances of systemic racism. As we can see by these two comparisons, film has developed greatly in the modern technological context. We can see, although the Blair Witch Project was a phenomenon of its time, and still is regarded that way, time has forced the concept to be outdated, and the evolution of films, similar to Get Out, which peel back the nuances of American society in an ever-changing world, are the ones that remain exceptional as horror films in our memory. Thank you for watching.